All right, Brew Day Live, Big Brew Day. As you can see, I am in my basement brewery. It is the most beautiful day of the year here in Massachusetts, and I'm brewing inside. So of course, losing my Wi-Fi connection here. My golf net fell over, and it's gonna fall over again. Very windy today, not ideal. So we're brewing inside, and I'll explain why in a minute. Brew day starting a little later in the afternoon than ideally I'd like. Reason was, I worked an event today, a beer fest at Cappy's in Peabody. So I got some leftover beverages. Those will get put to use later. So we're gonna unload the car. I was hoping my strike water would be at temperature by now, but it's not. So we got a little bit of time to kill. So I set up my mash and boil yesterday. I set the timer. It's only at 118 degrees. I need it at 165. That's no bueno. So I was hoping I'd get home at 3:30, literally just mash in and get started. But no. So let's find a home for these beers. And then we'll talk about what we're brewing today in a couple minutes. Beer fridge is decently well stocked at the moment. I did write a blog post about fridge beer, so check that out at wouldbebrewmaster.com. Pretty well stocked. So this is gonna have to go in the keezer. I don't like keeping commercial beer in the keezer. It's just asking to kink a line or bend something or make something leak, but we have too much beer. Tragedy, I know. So see, as it is, I got too much crap in here. So you'll see these lagers here. That is for an upcoming tasting post. We're going to do a tasting on lagers. I'm not going to talk too much more about that. But we'll throw these Sam Adams Juicy IPAs in here. Get the rest of our shit out of the car. Probably going to lose Wi-Fi going in the driveway. We'll see. I've not lost Wi-Fi. That's a plus. Got plenty of these Sun Cruiser vodka iced tea concoction. The kids like them. They're selling well. I'm still a beer guy. And I've got leftover Sam Adams Just the Haze non-alcoholic IPA. I don't know if I've talked about non-alcohol beer on the site or on the socials. When I was at Muntins, we actually did a lot of work in the NA space. I don't know how fruitful it was, but we did work on it. So that's something I've got thoughts on for sure. So we gotta load these in. Listen for a hiss. We don't want any gas leaking, especially since my spare tank is empty. All right, I think that's as good as that's gonna get for now. See if this closes. Beautiful, we're in good shape there. So, Big Brew Day 2023. I really liked the AHA's recipe this year. It was a big American, opening some windows, barley wine. It's actually style I've never brewed before. If I didn't already have this brew kind of penciled in to brew today to have ready for the North Shore Brewers Club meeting in June, I probably would brew it. Brewery would have brewed the official recipe of that, and if I wanted to spend, stupid amount of money on malt and hops to brew like a 10% beer. So here is our recipe. Can I flip this? I gotta be able to flip this. Where's the button to flip this? Oh, there it is. There's our recipe. So we are brewing today is a Keller beer. So that is a German lager, essentially. Keller beer. These are served at, the German, beer gardens and whatnot. Out of those, big, German kind of gravity kegs, if you will. So that's what was kind of drawn out of the hat. Because every quarter, our club, the North Shore Brewers, we have an in-club competition where a style is just pulled out of a hat. Everybody brews it, and then everyone kind of votes on which one they think is the best. So for quarter 2 of 2025, it was Keller beer. So Keller beer, it's more of a serving style or serving technique than it is an actual style. So, it's served traditionally out of those big German gravity casks. Here, I'll flip this around so I'm not showing you the recipe. Those big German gravity casks. And it's unfiltered, so a little bit of yeast character, a little bit more rustic. They then maybe even be a little bit more higher gravity, a little bit more bitter. A little bit more, maybe a little bit darker, a little bit richer. So the way the style is written now, when they updated the guidelines, is you declare a base style, so like a Helles or an Oktoberfest or a Pilsner, and you serve it in the Keller beer style. So for this recipe, I went with a base Helles. So let's take a look at the recipe now. I'm actually using bottled water. I never use bottled water because, our water here is reasonably good. It's reasonably soft. The only problem with our water is it's very high in chlorides. Not great for making, like West Coast IPAs or certain styles. So, but these were actually dropped off at our house. Our neighbor gets bottled water. It's a big, Latino, I think Dominican family. They drink a lot of water. So these were either delivered to our house by accident, or if I remember right, these were even dropped off with a note, like a free sample. So we're using it in this Helles lager because I really want like a soft, balanced water profile. So we're using the Poland spring water, and the grist is very simple. 9 pounds Pilsner malt, half an ounce of Environment Carahel. Now, I hate using Environment malts because they were a competitor of ours, and, brewers, especially pro brewers, revere the brand. So that, I still don't like using their malt. But that's what the local homebrew shop, Beer and Wine Hobby, had, and I needed German malt for this recipe. So that's what we're using. So it's interesting because when I thought about this recipe, I thought about a talk I sat in. It was a Mass Brewers Guild meeting where the head brewer of Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Denver gave a talk on how they do their traditional German lagers. And the gist of it was, you got to use all authentic ingredients. Okay, check. And you have to decoct everything. You have to. And, a lot of people, there are pros and cons, or they think it's needed or not needed, that it changes the beer, that it doesn't change the beer. She also said no crystal malts or caramel malts, makes the beer taste oxidized. And then she hammered home how the beer has to be fermented long, cold, slow. So basically, their philosophy is these beers need to be made like they were made in, 1910 or 1890, what have you. I'm doing very, very little of that. So we're using, the German malts. I have 100%. I milled my grain last night because, again, I wanted to be 100% ready to go when I got home. So my grist is all set, ready to mash in. Just need my strike water to get it temp. We're at 140. We're getting there. So, we're using the German malt for the German Helles, which is important. Where I differ is the grist, obviously. So there is 8 ounces or 5.2% Environment Carahel. Think of the name Carahel, what that means. Cara means caramel. Hell means Helles. It is a caramel malt designed for Helles. Another reason why I chose to use that here is the secret sauce in my cream ale. Another kind of light lawnmower beer to give it just a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of depth of color is caramel. So again, a very similar. What's the SRM on this thing? 13 SRM. So a light caramel malt to just add a little bit of depth of color, help with head retention, give it a little bit of sweetness. So that's what I'm going for to get that depth of color. Could have used a Munich malt. could have used, I'm pacing around, I'm showing you a review of my basement. It's actually much more organized than it used to be. I'll give you guys a tour. But yeah, I mean, I could have used like a melanoidin malt if I wanted it to have a kind of like a decocted flavor. But I'm not doing any of that. We're just keeping this simple. We're doing a single infusion mash at 152 for 60 minutes. You know, we're treating this like it's an English ale or an American craft beer. We're not wasting our time with step mashes or decoctions or anything like that. Actually, what I should do is I should set up this pump. This might speed this up a little bit. Bear with me here. We're going to do that right now. And a gust of wind just took my recipe, my brew sheet, blew it away. All right, so we're going to put that there. Put a little weight on that so that doesn't blow away again. All right, so we got the pump going. The only reason really I have a pump down here is my ceilings are pretty low. So any type of gravity system would be difficult. So that's really why I got this cheap plastic-headed chugger pump, just to help with my fly sparging as much as anything. So waiting this to get up to temp. Got a little bit of that Carahel in there. A specialty malt designed for Helles Lager in the Helles Lager. Novel idea, I know. So originally I was going to do a decoction or a step mash if I was going to brew outside. And today would have been a beautiful day to brew. But we chose to play it safe. We're brewing inside. I need to sit down. Like how I got these cheap chairs on Wayfair. Here you go. Most uncomfortable things in the world. All I need now, literally, these are the metal benches or the metal stools you get at a place that charges $20 for a cheeseburger and then charges extra for the fries. So we're waiting for this to mash in, or waiting for this to get up to temp so we can mash in. Then we'll start our timer for 1 hour. So while I do that, you know, I do use an igloo cooler, even though I have a quote-unquote all-in-one system. And the reason is simple. I don't have an easy way to heat up sparge water if I'm going to mash in the mash and boil. I do have an induction burner I could use, but if I run that in the mash and boil at the same time, I'm probably going to blow the circuit. I don't have enough current down here. I don't want to use my upstairs kitchen stove and schlep the water down the stairs. Jenny would hate that, so we're not doing that. So what I settled on is this igloo mash tun I had, you know, for my outside batches. I use it for all my batches pretty much. So I use the mash and boil as a hot liquor tank, get my water up to temp, then transfer it into the cooler, mash in the cooler, and while I'm mashing, the mash and boil is going to heat up my sparge water. Then I'll fly sparge into a bucket. And then once the sparge water is empty, the wort that's run off into the bucket goes back into the mash and boil. That becomes the boil kettle. Eventually, I'm going to get another cooler. Probably another cooler, if not another. Yeah, no, it's going to have to be another cooler because I really can only heat one vessel at a time down here. Unless I do have a 240 volt circuit, but unless I'm going to get a whole new like top of the line brewing system and have the outlet moved. At this point, I can really only heat the one thing at a time down here. So I want to get a second cooler to use as a hot liquor tank. That way, when I fly sparge, I can pump the wort from the mash tun right into the boil kettle. Avoid some hot side aeration from running off into a bucket. Make it a little bit easier. That'll be down the road. But I did, this space is a lot better organized than it had been. I'm not a very organized person, can be cluttered. But the game changer right here is this sink. This makes dumping beer so much easier. This makes cleaning so much easier. This makes running the wort chiller so much easier. Because before, I'd run a hose from outside through the door inside, and then the wastewater would go into buckets. But now, I can just hook up a hose right to the sink, and it's going to be so much easier. It's actually going to be my first brew with the sink down here, so I'm excited about that. I got a lot more space. I relocated my fermentation chambers, so they're right next to that outlet. So this is actually going to go into one of those. Got to move the cat litter box, of course. So the plan for this batch is for fermentation. So I will do what Bierstadt would do, or something a little bit more traditional. We're just going to single stage it. We're going to pitch our yeast at 48. So we're going to start it cold because I want this beer to be clean. One of my pet peeves of this style is I've been to so many craft breweries where they have just green, acetaldehyde-laden lagers that weren't aged properly that they sell as Keller beers, and I fucking hate that. We're not doing that. So we're going to ferment this cold. I'm going to start it at 48 degrees using 3470, the Vine Stefan strain. We're starting it at 48 degrees. Then after 3 days, I'm going to unplug the heat belt, and I'm going to let it free rise up to 58 from 48. And it's going to sit there for 14 days total. And then what are we going to do after 14 days to lager it? Well, the way these Keller beers are traditionally made is they're krausenated. So the brewery, once the beer's ready to package, it goes into the big gravity keg. They top it off with some fresh fermenting wort to carbonate it in the keg. We're not doing that. We're not a professional brewery. I do not have, an infinite supply of fresh wort to krausenate with. So we're going to do the next best thing. We're going to add a little bit of DME. And we're going to go from our primary fermenter into a keg. And we're going to keg condition it as we lager it. So in 2 weeks, we're going to rack it out of the carboy into a keg. We're going to rack it onto a DME solution, just enough to carbonate it. We're going to bung it up, close up the keg. Then we're going to ramp the temperature down a couple degrees a day. That'll keep the yeast working. That'll give the yeast enough time to ferment the sugars in the DME and carb up the beer. And we're going to be lagering it as we go. And once we get down to 38 degrees, we're going to let it sit. The whole lager period is going to be 4 weeks. So this beer is going to be ready in 6 weeks, just in time for the club meeting at the end of June. So that is the plan, how we're going to condition this beer. Because this style, it is as much, if not more, about the conditioning of the beer and the aging as it is the actual recipe and the brewing process. So that's what we're doing. We are almost at temp. We're at 163. I'm going to put the foam down, and actually, because what I have to do first, I have to pump my hot liquor from here into the mash tun, and then we'll grain in, pour our mash on top. So what I should do is, should have borrowed a tripod, but I did not. So let's see where I can prop my phone up. Actually, will this work? No, that won't work. You can tell I put no planning into this. How do I want to do this? Perfect. All right, we're just going to leave that right there. You may or may not be able to hear me. Don't want to lose too much heat while we're transferring. I could pump it through the bottom and leave the lid on. How have I never thought of this? How have I never thought of this? This way my strike water is not losing heat as it gets transferred over. All right, I need to turn this off. Once we mash in, I will need a beverage. Leaking a little bit. Just need to change that Teflon tape probably. Yeah, and that shelf that the mash tun is on is not level. We need to fix that. The floors in this basement are horrible. It does feels like it's taking too slow. That's the problem. Did I have the valve closed? Yep. As usual, I'm an idiot. I was wondering why those taking so long. Reason 8,000,005 why I'm not a professional brewer. Alright, that's good. We get that, we get the pump. That's good. This is clear. We are ready to mash in. This is how I do it with these buckets. On the shoulder, and then grab the handle on the back side to maintain control. And then stir as the grain goes into the mash tun. Ensure as much of that grain absorbs that water. We don't want dough balls. We want to make sure all of that grainy goodness gets nice and wet, absorbs that water. Those enzymes get activated. The enzymes that our friends in Bamberg or wherever the hell Environment buys their malt from, or before they put it in their bag, all those enzymes that our friends at the malt house created, we need to use those, we need to activate those to convert the starch in the malt to fermentable sugars. The wind is like blowing the grain dust right in my face from the window. Yeah, shit. Poured a little heavy towards the end. It's a very thick grist. Very thick mash, I should say. Now we're going to have to Vorloff this a couple times just to make sure the top gets submerged in our liquid here. Otherwise, we're looking pretty good. Oh yeah, lots of flour coming out the bottom of the smash. Oh no, you cunt. I do not want this to be stuck. You fucking cunt. There we go. Little stir. Seems to have helped. Crisis averted. If anyone's offended by the C-bombs, there's a reason why this page is age restricted. Yeah, we're going to have to Vorloff this several times before we start the timer. What? So my last all-grain batch, I believe, was my Irish Stout. That used Malting Company of Ireland malt. Ran off like a dream. Perfectly clear wort. I mean, it was black. It was opaque, but you could tell it was clear. This is murky. Couldn't tell you last time I brewed with Vireman malt. I'm surprised how friable it was too. Because this malt, realistically, is probably, it shouldn't be that much more modified than that Irish Stout malt I was using before. And we're getting there though. Alright. I think after this last one, we'll be in good shape. And we can close the lid and start our timer. Yeah, it still isn't that clear. I don't love this. Yeah, see, it starts clear, then get more chunks coming out from the false bottom. And it is getting clearer. Yeah, this is as good as it's gonna get. I don't want to lose any more heat. We're calling it. We are mashed in. Hey Siri, start a timer for 60 minutes. Did you start it? All right, we are mashed in. So next step is got to get our hot liquor ready. So we need, we're fly sparging 4.85 gallons. So we'll call it 5 or 5 1/4. So we need to top off the mash tun, or what is now our hot liquor tank. All right. That's good. All right, so that's good. This is set to 170. Figure we'll lose a degree or two while we're sparging. All right, now next step is lactic acid. So my approach to this, you know, a lot of all pro brewers measure their or most pro brewers, I should say, check their mash pH and their sparge water. I just use a calculator on Beersmith. My philosophy is close enough is good enough. So my sparge water always gets half a teaspoon, just to avoid picking up any tannins or anything like that while sparging. And then I use a calculator to calculate my mash pH and how much I need to get it where I want. So this mash is also getting half a teaspoon of lactic acid. This is a very, very pale wort, so we don't want that pH getting too high, because that's how you get tannins and haze. It's not good for the yeast. So let's get a little bit of acid. Yeah, this beer is not Ryan Heights Kaboo compliant officially, like anybody gives a fuck. Just to kind of get that lactic mixed in there, we'll boil off one more time. Now we officially do not touch this until we are ready to sparge. Now, I used to check the mash pH all the time, and those pH meters, especially the super cheap ones, they're such a pain in the ass to calibrate, and if they're off, you're going to do more harm to your beer trying to properly adjust your pH due to a poorly calibrated meter than you are with a method like this. Now, if I was a commercial brewery and I was brewing every day, or even like a small, like, nano is brewing at least twice a week, all right, then I'm checking the pH, especially if these are core beers where I want them to be consistent. Okay, my flagship, whatever, the mash pH needs to be this for the flavor profile one. Like if I was doing that, then yes. But for a home brew, for a one-off batch with a new recipe, new ingredients, close enough is good enough as far as I'm concerned. Like I've screwed up too many. That's why with my mash, I don't even check the temperature, because if it's off and I try to change it, I'm gonna just the fucking with it causes more issues than just close enough is good enough. That's kind of become my philosophy for home brewing. There's some beers that I brewed a lot that I have a little bit more dialed in, but for something like this, it's probably going to be a one-off. I'm not worried about it. So now we get the pump going, get this recirculating, got an hour to kill. I'm thirsty. See what we've got in the beer fridge. Here's where we're starting. God tier beer right here. Actually, I reviewed this 12-pack on the site this week. Came with Allagash White, their hazy IPA, their lager, and the triple. So what's interesting is I was drinking the lager last night. I was trying to research, trying to okay, what exactly is in this? What's the grist? What are the hops? And the hops, it was kind of a blend of four. They call it a Pilsner, but I don't remember what they were. But these were more. I think they were more like modern craft like type hops than they are like traditional. Like there was no like German hops in there that I recall. There were no like American versions, so. It definitely, that's where I was getting that modern hop flavor was coming from, was there. But as I'm trying to look up what the grist is, I'm thinking, I swear to God this happened. I'm drinking the beer and go, wouldn't shock me if there's wheat in this, because it does have just a tiny bit of haze, and I was getting some creaminess, and sure enough, I found on the website, the malts was our Allagash blend, which they get from Brees. Essentially, Brees Brewers malt, malted to Allagash's specification, but if you're trying to clone Allagash, Brees 2 Rows where you want to start. There were some Blue Ox Yankee pills in there that was listed second, so that makes me think that the majority of the grist was the Brees. Then they threw in some Blue Ox because they love supporting the local malt. And sure enough, the third ingredient was red malted wheat, so I did pick up on that. That was in there. Well, and if anybody's watching, the secret ingredient in Allagash White is black pepper. I found that out today. Because if you do the tour of Allagash, they tell you that, talk about the history of Belgian wit, the citrus, the coriander, the other spices, and then they tell you that, the secret sauce is every wit beer has a secret ingredient that nobody tells, and we can't tell you what it is, and nobody knows what it is. Everyone signs NDAs. Well, I found out what it was. So anybody's watching, the secret is out. And that would make some sense too, because the Allagash house yeast isn't like nearly as phenolic to me as like a lot of the Belgian wit strains. So you want to get a little bit of that in there, just a little hint of black pepper. And that kind of plays up the coriander, maybe makes that taste a little less hammy or vegetal. Yeah, speaking of coriander, that's my next brew. Next brew is the Samuel Adams White Ale Clone. That's going to be a 10-gallon batch. That one I have to brew outside because it's 10 gallons. And that certainly is going to have coriander and a million other spices in there. So looking forward to doing that. Yep, so kind of running out of things to talk about. Talked about the grist. We talked about the water. So I thought about going for a Munich profile. I usually don't target like an individual like city or region. But to get the Munich water out, I had to use a bunch of chalk, which is a pain in the ass to get to dissolve. So I just went with kind of like a yellow, balanced flavor. So going back to our recipe, we've got our Pilsner malt, our Carahel, and then our hops. We have Perla at 90 minutes, and then Hallertau at 5. So I want this to be malty, but the style says, you know, these Keller beers can have a little bit more hop character. So the Hallertau, I just want a little bit of hop aroma, maybe a hint of flavor, but I do want this to be malt forward. It's going to be Pilsner malt dominant. It's not going to be overly bready or rich, or if it is, it's going to be residual body, because we're targeting, what were we targeting, 1051 on this, which for a Helles is quite high. It's probably outside of the guidelines, but it's within kind of the Keller guidelines. Not that the guidelines are the be-all and end-all. But the malt flavor, it's going to be Pils malt. And then just that Carahel is going to give it a little extra, a little bit of depth of color, maybe a hint of extra sweetness. So we're giving it 2 sachets of the old reliable Vine Stefan strain. I could have used one of the fancier, expensive liquid strains, but I don't want to spend that much money or make big yeast starters. Our Perla, 4.3, and our Hallertau is only 2.8 IBUs. You can thank these recent god-awful European hop harvests killing yields, killing oil content, killing alpha acids. Definitely a challenge for everyone. So I was targeting, how many IBUs in this thing? 23, we'll be close. So this is going to be a malty, well-attenuated beer with just a little bit of hop character. I hate to use the word character. It's going to have a little bit of hop flavor and bitterness, or hop flavor and aroma, just a little bit. So that's Big Brew Day 2025. Wasn't sure how long this would last. We've been doing this for almost 45 minutes. Talked about the recipe, talked about the process. Yeah, so I think it's covered it. You guys don't need to sit and wait for my mash to finish, or I might jump back on when I'm sparging, but probably not. But thanks everyone. Have a happy Big Brew Day.